All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to step into the shoes of a detective. But, we're not investigating a crime scene here. We are investigating the very foundation of human reality itself. Think about it. Every single day, you rely on this massive web of information just to navigate your life. But have you ever actually stopped to wonder what makes all that information solid? To really kick off this investigation, we've got to stop taking our everyday reality for granted. Like, how do you actually know the sun is going to rise tomorrow? How do you know for sure that fire burns, or that your friends are actually real and not just some wild simulation? Sure, we all have opinions, but what exactly upgrades a simple opinion into concrete, indisputable knowledge?
Well, that brings us to our primary suspect for today's explainer, epistemology. It's a big word, but it's basically just the branch of philosophy totally obsessed with the nature, the sources, the justification, and the limits of human knowledge. Literally, from Plato all the way up to modern cognitive scientists and AI developers, these great minds have relentlessly pursued the answer to one incredibly simple question. What actually makes a belief genuine knowledge?
So, here's our roadmap for today. First, the mystery of knowing, then justified true belief, followed by the types of human knowledge. After that, we'll look at Indian theories of knowledge, and finally, understanding our own reality.
All right, let's jump straight into part one, the mystery of knowing and our investigative toolkit.
So, what tools do we actually have in our toolkit? Well, first up is perception. That's our primary access to the world, though, optical illusions pretty much prove it isn't completely foolproof. Second is memory. It preserves our clues, but it can definitely be distorted. Third is testimony. We rely heavily on books and experts simply because we can't verify every single thing ourselves. Fourth, we've got reason, which lets us recognize patterns and logic. And finally, there's introspection, giving us a direct, inward look at our own mental states.
Moving right along to part two, justified true belief and the classical rules of the game.
Now that our tools are established, we've got to understand the historical rules. For centuries, philosophers defined knowledge using a very specific formula, known as JTB, or justified true belief. To basically crack the case here, you needed three specific building blocks. Number one, you must actually believe the thing. Number two, the thing must actually be true in reality. And number three, you must have justification. That just means your belief is backed up by sound reasoning or really solid evidence. It honestly seemed foolproof. If you had all three of those, congratulations, you officially had knowledge.
But then the 20th century rolled around, and a philosopher named Edmund Gettier threw a massive curveball into epistemology. He proved that you could have all three steps of JTB perfectly aligned purely by sheer coincidence. Just imagine you're looking at a broken clock, right? But it happens to show the exact right time at the exact moment you glance at it. You believe it, it's true, and you're totally justified in checking a clock. But you only got it right by luck. Gettier basically proved that luck is absolutely not genuine knowledge, and that completely blew the traditional definition wide open.
Okay, on to part three, types of human knowledge, or we categorize our evidence.
Since that traditional formula clearly has some holes, philosophers like to categorize our evidence into different types. And this brings us to a major dividing line in philosophy. On one side, we have what's called a priori knowledge. This is stuff you can figure out just by thinking, completely independent of experiencing the outside world. Think mathematics. You don't need to go hike into the woods to prove that 2 + 2 = 4, right? On the flip side, we have a posteriori knowledge. This depends entirely upon experience. You literally have to go out into the world, make scientific observations, and actually test things to discover this kind of truth.
We can also categorize our findings by separating facts from actual skills. So, propositional knowledge is knowing that a fact is true, like knowing that Paris is the capital of France. Procedural knowledge, on the other hand, is knowing how to perform a skill. Think of balancing and pedaling a bike or playing a song on the piano. Our sources also mention something called knowledge by acquaintance, which is basically having a direct familiarity with a person or a place. All of this just goes to show that human understanding is so much richer than simply memorizing a giant database of facts.
Let's shift gears a bit for part four. Indian theories of knowledge, taking a more global perspective.
Stepping outside the Western tradition entirely, we find this wonderfully different approach. See, while Western philosophy was obsessing over how to justify a belief, classical Indian philosophy went down a really sophisticated path called pramana sastra. They focused on the pramanas, which are the actual valid means or instruments of acquiring knowledge. And here's the real kicker. They didn't just study this for academic fun. Across these different schools of thought, getting valid knowledge was viewed as absolutely essential for attaining spiritual liberation, like moksha or nirvana.
Now, when you look at these distinct philosophical schools side by side, it's fascinating to see how they disagree on the ultimate nature of reality, which means they completely disagree on which tools work best. The Nyaya school, which is a deep tradition of logic and realism, they recognize four valid means: perception, inference, comparison, and reliable verbal testimony. They actually built incredibly sophisticated theories of debate around this. But as we move over to Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, that toolkit changes dramatically, all based on how they fundamentally view the universe.
For example, Buddhist epistemologists like Dignaga and Dharmakirti, they simplify things radically, down to just two. They accepted only two valid means of knowledge: direct perception and inference. For them, pure perception is fundamentally non-conceptual. You're just experiencing the immediate, unique moment as it happens. The second you start using concepts or labels, you've already moved into inference. It's a highly streamlined approach, but it perfectly supports their broader doctrines: the idea that absolutely everything is impermanent and that there is no permanent self. Then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have Advaita Vedanta, and they expand the toolkit all the way to 6. They take the 4 from the Nyaya school and add 2 more: postulation based on circumstances and knowledge through absence, or non-apprehension. So why so many? Well, it's because Advaita Vedanta draws a strict line between our everyday empirical knowledge and ultimate absolute knowledge. Sure, reason and perception will get us through our daily lives, but reaching the ultimate realization of Brahman, which is the non-dual reality, that requires a much wider array of tools, including scriptural testimony and deep self-realization.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 5, Understanding Our Own Reality.
Seeing how these Western and Eastern threads of thought come together really builds a complete picture for us. Human knowledge, it doesn't come from just one place. It is this dynamic, continuous interaction of perception, reason, memory, and testimony. Whether you're looking through the lens of Western debates on justification or the classical Indian taxonomy of the Pramanas, the main takeaway is absolutely clear. Knowing isn't just passively soaking up facts like a sponge. It is an active, ongoing investigation of reality itself. Ultimately, epistemology challenges us to figure out how we understand ourselves and the universe we live in. So, detective, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to investigate on your own time. If knowing is truly this complex, active process of interpretation, are your deepest, most fundamental beliefs actually knowledge? Or are they just well-justified luck?